So Yirmiyahu Hanavi, he says, I cry about it. Eini eini yogda mayim. I cry for the temple. I cry for what I've seen. And we're told that we're also supposed to cry during these 3 weeks. But the question is, do we really cry? Is there even a reason for us to cry? Are we aware of any legitimate reason? It's an emotional setting, so it's not enough for it to be an intellectual, it's not enough for it to make logical sense why we should cry. Does it affect us on such a level that we end up crying for the destruction of the temple? I don't know, that's a big question mark. So I wanted to see a few things about this with you guys to pour in some meaning into these 3 weeks that we're in. And of course, we're learning for the refuah shlema, for the recovery, for the healing of anybody who is sick, physically, mentally, emotionally. Among them, Shlomo ben Clara and Yehonatan ben Malka and Menachem Mendel Shehechiyanu ben Shifra Dvora, and anybody else that needs a healing throughout the world, anybody sick with corona, of course, and for the neshamot of people that we loved and have moved on, amongst them Malkiel Natan ben Ezra. Okay, so top of the page, guys, here is the verse, the pasuk from which we learn out, from which we have this title of the weeks that we're in now. We're in what's called Shloshet HaShavuot, the 3 weeks, which are called also Bein-HaMetzarim, okay? In the narrow places. Okay, Yemei Bein-HaMetzarim. You might often hear that here in Israel, at least. In the synagogue, in the shul, people talking, and so on. These are the days which are in the narrow places. Yemei Bein-HaMetzarim. And this is taken from the book of Eicha, where Yirmiyahu the prophet describes, and he writes that Yehuda, okay, Judea, the temple, Jerusalem, the Jews were exiled because of misery or poorness and harsh oppression. He yashva b'goim lo matza manoach. But when she settled among the nations, she found no rest. Jews were never able to really sit at peace and live calmly in the diaspora, in the exile. And Yirmiyahu Navi says all her pursuers overtook her in the narrow places. The Jewish people have always been, and it seems like in the past and also in the present, we know there's a rise in anti-Semitism in America and Europe. So the Jewish people are being prosecuted. This didn't begin in 586 BCE, but it happened then, and it happened in between 586 and 2020, and even before that. Okay? So the question is, which I posed a few moments ago, is there what to cry for? Why in the world? What's going on? There's no temple. There's no Beit HaMikdash. Does that really affect us on a daily basis? Do I really care that much? Okay, I'm talking about myself and perhaps some of you guys, some of you ladies. What's the deal? Okay, why should we be crying? What did we lose? Okay, and what exactly are we mourning for? Because we know we're supposed to mourn for the temple. So what exactly are we mourning for? So let's see, before we see exactly what we're mourning for and what the temple was about a little bit, I just want to share with you I just want to set the bar really high and then break it down and go backwards. Okay, and I want to share with you 2 examples of things we're supposed to do, and we do. Not supposed to do, we do, if you're somebody that tries to keep halakha, Jewish law. So these are things that you probably find yourself doing. Excuse me, hi Ma, do you have the source sheet there?
No.
Here, I attached it again.
Thanks.
Okay, so I want to share with you guys 2 examples of things that we do nowadays which help us connect to the Beit HaMikdash, not only the first and second temples which were, but more importantly, help us connect to the third temple which will be. Okay, and we're going to take it from here. So number 2, the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah, the Talmud in Rosh Hashanah, in describing how the festival of Sukkot would be celebrated back in the good old days, back during the temple days. So the Mishnah says there, in the beginning, before the temple was destroyed. We're talking about the second temple. Before the second temple was destroyed, the lulav was taken in the temple 7 and in the country 1 day. What does that mean? That means people celebrating Sukkot, which as we know is a 7-day holiday, people celebrating Sukkot in the times of the temple would only shake the lulav for the first day of Sukkot, unless they were in the temple. If you came to the Bein-HaMetzarim, to the temple, you would shake your lulav with your etrog, the 4 species. You would shake them every single day of the festival. But the majority of the Jewish people who did not live in Jerusalem, or who perhaps did not make it to the temple, they would only shake on the first day of Sukkot. And the rest, the other 6 days of Sukkot, people did not shake the lulav and etrog. Okay? That's how it was in the times of the temple. After the temple was destroyed, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was a rabbi who lived during the destruction of the temple and was smuggled out of Jerusalem and had a famous meeting with Vespasian and eventually with Titus, who he was the Roman general that we know destroyed the second temple. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai instituted, after the temple was destroyed, that the lulav should be taken in the country 7. After the temple was destroyed, even if you're not in the temple, and there's no option now to be in the temple once it's destroyed, obviously, nonetheless, we're going to celebrate and shake the lulav every day of Sukkot for all 7 days. Why? The Mishnah says, in remembrance of the temple. Okay? Zecher lamikdash. Zecher is memory. Zikaron, like Yom HaZikaron, Memorial Day. So in remembrance to the temple, which is what we do nowadays, guys. Nowadays, whether you're in Israel or in America or Europe, wherever it is you are, we shake the lulav for every day of Sukkot. Unless, of course, it falls out one of the days on Shabbat, obviously. Okay. So, and why did he do that? In remembrance of the temple, which seems to be saying just to remember and kind of re-experience and get a little nostalgic and, thinking back how it used to be. In the temple, they shook 7 days. Now there's no temple, so we'll shake 7 days as well, the lulav, and remember the stories of how they used to shake 7 days in the temple, which we no longer have. Okay, that's what the Mishnah seems to be saying. The Gemara now, the Talmud. Hi, Ray. Welcome, Ray. I'm going to attach the source sheet for you as well. One more time. Hey, Shelly. There it is. I attached it again. You can download it if you'd like to. So,
thank you.
You're very welcome. So the Gemara says, from where do we derive that one performs actions in remembrance of the temple? How do we know? Okay, the Gemara asks, that such a thing is a correct thing to do. That we should do something like that. Because this is not the only thing that was done in remembrance, Zecher LaMikdash, in remembrance of the temple. There were a number of other things. I only brought 2 examples. So how do we know that this is even a thing to do, a concept? The Gemara asks. And the Gemara answers, as the verse states in the book of Jeremiah, I will restore health to you and I will heal you of your wounds, said Hashem, because I have called you an outcast. She is Zion. There is none who demands her. Okay? In Hebrew, Doresh en la. When Hashem tells Jeremiah the prophet, okay, later on in chapter 30, from chapter 30, 31, 32, 33, those are a few chapters in the book of Yirmiyahu Hanavi, in the book of Jeremiah, that are actually positive chapters and speak about the good days which will come after the Babylonian destruction, okay, of 586 BCE. So Hashem tells Yirmiyahu Hanavi, I will heal Jerusalem, I will heal Israel, I will come back to Israel. She's an outcast because nobody demands her. Nobody asks for her. So the Gemara says, from this I learn, this teaches by inference that Jerusalem requires demanding. Okay? Michlal debaya drisha. This teaches us, if Hashem says it's not a good situation, that Zion, Jerusalem, Israel is not being demanded, I infer from that that Yerushalayim should be demanded. And therefore, that's a source for the question which the Gemara asked, from where do we derive that one performs actions and the remembrance of the temple? Here we see that you should, because you have to demand Zion, demand Jerusalem. Okay? But guys, is understood so far? Yeah. Yeah, Mom.
What does it mean? What does it mean to demand Zion?
Right. So that's what I want. That's basically what I want to touch on and ask, because the Talmud, the Gemara here, seems to ask one question and they give a proof which doesn't have nothing to do with the question, but it's still not exactly what the question was. The Gemara asked, from where do I know that a person should do actions like Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai did to remember the temple? Zecher HaMikdash. I put this in bold. To remember in remembrance of the temple. And then they bring a source that says that the temple, Jerusalem, has to be demanded. So what's going on here? Okay? Either remembering or demanding. So what the Gemara seems to be saying, guys, what the Talmud seems to be saying, if the Talmud chooses to bring a source from which we infer, from which it is inferred, and from which we extract the importance of demanding Yerushalayim, demanding Jerusalem, demanding the temple, that is explaining and teaching us how does one remember the temple? By demanding it. Okay? That's exactly what the Talmud is doing. Meaning, in English, it's very beautiful. I mean, and it's a good example of what remembering is not. Okay, in the Talmud, in Judaism. In English, memory means that you're sitting somewhere, whatever it is you are, or perhaps you're lying down or standing, whatever it is, you're somewhere and you're remembering what was in the past. You remember something that happened X amount of hours, weeks, months, years ago, centuries ago. And that's basically it. That could cause you to cry. That could cause you to be sad, depressed, dream for those days and so on. But basically, it's a very passive situation that you're in. It's a very not active, okay, situation, experience that you're going through. On the other hand, guys, memory, like we see now as the rabbis understand it, memory is a very active act to do. It's not a passive thing. It's something which is supposed to be active. Zikaron, it means you have to do something. Not only that you have to do something, but the memory itself is connected to action. The moment you're having some memory, the memory is basically valueless, is worth nothing unless there's some action that's being caused as a result of it. Like in our situation, where the Gemara says Jerusalem, the temple, has to be demanded. To demand something is very strong. It's not to request. It's not to ask. It's not, to hint, like we saw last night. It's to demand. That's like, bang on the table. So if remembering equals demanding, that means it's a very active thing to do and not passive. And I'll give you guys just like two examples. Okay, the root of the word memory or remembering, zecher, the root is zayin chaf resh. You guys see that? That's what word is that? So many of you know this. That is the word for zachar, for male. Okay, zachar is male, zayin chaf resh, the same exact letters, and nekeva is female. Okay, who was the first male that was created? I almost said born. Who was the first male that was created? It was Adam HaRishon. Adam HaRishon, he was active. I mean, Hashem basically was the one who was acting here, but it was Adam who gave his limb or his side, without getting into all the details there, but Adam gave part of his body to the receiver. Who was the receiver? Chava, Eve. She received some part of Adam's body, and she was then created. So we see from the very beginning Okay, this is just one example. From the very beginning, the first time a male appears in the Torah, in the Bible, in the Chumash, it's in this context of giving. Okay, zachar, which is the root for memory, has to have with it some kind of giving, some kind of action, okay, some kind of effect in the present. Okay, King Solomon also compares the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai to Hashem being the male, okay, the groom, and the Jewish people being the bride. Hashem was the giver of the Ten Commandments, of the Torah, and the Jewish people were the kala, the groom, the bride, excuse me. We were a receiver of the Torah. So what I'm saying is memory, zikaron in Hebrew, okay, is not something of the past. It begins in the past, but if it doesn't affect my present, it's basically worth nothing. Okay, this is a perfect example, okay, for what I'm saying. So therefore, guys, and this is very different than like Memorial Day in America, like, you know, buying cards, sales in Macy's, and day off of work, a laid back day. Yom HaZikaron is supposed to be a very active day. It's supposed to change your present. You're supposed to get something from it. Something is supposed to happen. Okay. Therefore, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says, why? So now we have to reread what he said. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai instituted that the lulav should be taken in the country 7 days in remembrance for the temple. Zecher HaMikdash. It doesn't mean it's just like a cute kind of thing, nostalgic, that I remember how it used to be. That's nice and sweet. But how does that change my present, the present? Because again, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is saying, if we stop shaking the lulav every single day of Sukkot, okay, then when the Beit HaMikdash, the third Beit HaMikdash, will be rebuilt, that's not going to be something on a person's radar. That's not going to be something they're used to even be doing, of shaking the lulav 7 days. And that's why he instituted Zecher HaMikdash, to help us prepare and change our lives nowadays. So when the third temple is rebuilt, we already are accustomed to behaving in the third temple mindset and shaking the lulav for 7 days, and we're able to adapt much easier to the third temple. Okay, I'll give you guys one more example. It's very, very beautiful. One more example for what it means, Zecher HaMikdash, remembrance of the temple. Okay, the Shulchan Aruch, and I only brought part of it, the Shulchan Aruch, the Jewish Code of Law, Rav Yosef Karo, about 500 years ago, not too far away from us in the city of Tzfat. Okay, so he writes, and everybody knows this, if you're in the synagogue, if you're in the Beit Knesset, and there's Birkat Kohanim, the priests are blessing the people in the shul, in the Beit Knesset. So whether you're a guy or a girl, you're not supposed to look at the hands, okay, at the hands of the priest, at the Star Trek, at the hands of the priest as they bless the people. Not only are the people being blessed in the synagogue not supposed to look at their hands, but also the priests themselves. Nowadays, like this morning in the Beit Knesset, when we got a bracha, me and Shalom David, so we hid our eyes. We put our eyes under my talis, and if you don't wear a talis, you're supposed to lower your eyes, whether you're a man or a woman, whatever it is. You're not supposed to look at the fingers, at the hands of the Kohanim, of the priests, and the priests themselves are not supposed to look. They're supposed to give a blessing like this with the talis, their talit, separating their eyesight from their fingers. That's the basic thing. Okay, and this is what the Shulchan Aruch says. Okay, the congregation should be attentive to the blessing. Their faces should face the Kohanim, but they should not stare at them. Meaning, if the Kohanim are standing in front of them, you're not supposed to stand this way in the shul, in the synagogue, or that way. You're supposed to face the direction from which you're receiving the blessing, but you're not supposed to look at their hands. So you're supposed to be like this, or like this with your eyes closed, whatever, or under a talit, and so on. Okay, the Mishnah Berurah explains. The Mishnah Berurah, what it was written by the Chafetz Chaim, Rabbi Yisrael Meir of Radin, who passed away, I think, in the 1930s, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, big rabbi, big tzaddik. So the Mishnah Berurah writes, in explaining that, according to the letter of the law, okay, right over here, umidina, according to like the letter of the law, the dry law, one is only prohibited to glance for a long period. since this might cause a distraction. If you're glancing at their hands, okay, at their fingers and watching them, that might cause you to be distracted from the blessing itself. But glancing a little bit is fine. That's no big deal if you look at their fingers, at their hands for just a few moments. That's not going to cause a distraction. Okay, according to the letter of the law, Medina. Specifically in the temple, this is my translation into English, so if it doesn't sound too smooth, that's my fault. Specifically in the temple times, when they would bless with Hashem's explicit name and the divine presence would rest on their hands, was it prohibited to even glance briefly. So the Mishnah Berurah says, in the times of the Beit HaMikdash, when the Kohanim would give the blessing, which with God's explicit name, which we don't even really know how to pronounce nowadays, and you're not supposed to, and it's a huge deal. And when they would do that in the temple, the divine presence, okay, the Shekhinah, would rest on their hands. The divine presence, not like the lightning and fireworks of Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark, but kind of something like that, okay? And just like in that movie, when the people looked at the ark, they kind of died and got melted away. So too, in the times of the temple, lahavdil, okay, it was prohibited to even glance briefly, because if you would look at the Kohanim's fingers in the temple, and the divine presence is resting there, literally, not on a metaphorical level, but like mamish, you would die. Your soul would leave its body to go cling with the Shekhinah, to be part of the Shekhinah, and you would die. So in the temple, you couldn't look even briefly, but nowadays, there's no real problem to look briefly, the Mishnah Berurah says. Nonetheless, the Mishnah Berurah says, the custom nowadays is also not to glance at all, like we do. Why? In remembrance of the temple. Okay? Zecher lamikdash. What does that mean, guys? So I'm not looking nowadays because almost 2,000 years ago, if I would have looked, I would have been fried on the spot and died. No. Zecher. This is something that I'm supposed to get from this. This is something, this experience is supposed to give me something. So what's going on here? So once again, I have to accustom myself now, even though it's been almost 2,000 years without a Beit HaMikdash, without a temple, I have to accustom myself now, if I believe that the temple could be rebuilt any day and Mashiach can come at any single moment. So nowadays, okay, I prepare myself for the temple. Imagine the temple would be built tonight or tomorrow morning. As the Rambam says, Maimonides says, each Jew is supposed to declare, Ani Mamin Bemun Beviat HaMashiach, right? So imagine the temple would be built tonight or tomorrow morning at latest. And then I come to the temple and I don't know how to behave. I don't know how to behave in the temple. It's a whole new ball game. I've never done all these different things. If I have been looking at the Kohanim's fingers in my synagogue, okay, in New Jersey or in Katsrin or Florida, wherever it is, for the past 1,900 years, then I'm going to get to the temple tonight, tomorrow morning, and it's going to be part of my nature to look at their hands, because there's no problem nowadays to look at their hands. But if I do that then in the temple, that's it, okay? I'm gone. I'm dead. So meaning, nowadays, I already live in a temple mindset. That's part of preparing myself for the Beit HaMikdash, and that's part of demanding the Beit HaMikdash. Hashem sees I care so much about the Beit HaMikdash that even though there's no problem nowadays to really look at the hands of the Kohanim, I remember the Beit HaMikdash. How? By changing my lifestyle, by not looking, because I believe so much and I yearn so much for the construction and rebuilding of the third temple that also now I'm behaving in such a temple mindset and not looking at the hands, because I want to any moment be there in the temple. Also, of course, not looking at their hands, because the divine presence, the Shekhinah is going to be there. You guys with me? Yeah? Okay, this is very, very beautiful. And we do this whenever you go to synagogue, when there's Birkat Kohanim, this is what you experience. And it's beautiful, because this is something I try to meditate on this, think about this. Okay, if I'm not, now it's really hard to concentrate with the mask and the shul and you're schwitzing and sweating and it's like crazy. But it's something that's nice to think about and reflect on when you're getting the blessing. from the priests, from the Kohanim, in the Beit Knesset, in the synagogue, that I am now behaving as if I was in the temple, because I want to be in the temple so much. I'm yearning to be in the temple so much. And now, guys, what we have to ask is, what's so important with the Beit HaMikdash? Why do we even need it? Okay, is something lacking from us? Do we wake up every day? Okay, imagine we woke up one morning and all our clothes are gone. We'd notice that. That would be a problem. We'd have to do something about that. Okay, imagine we wake up and there's no food in the house. Or imagine we wake up, okay, and we don't feel healthy. We have a headache, whatever it is. Do we wake up every morning and say to ourselves, oh man, another day without the Beit HaMikdash, without the temple? I don't think, I don't, that usually doesn't happen to me. I don't know if that happens to you guys or not, but that's a question I think we need to ask ourselves. And if the answer is no, we don't feel a lacking, then we have to look into it. We have to look into this a little bit. What's the big deal that there's no Beit HaMikdash today? And what are we mourning for? What are we supposed to cry for in these 3 weeks between the 17th of Tammuz and Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av? So I want to share with you guys, part of what I'm about to share with you guys is an idea I heard in a talk given by Rabbi Re'em HaKohen. Rabbi Re'em HaKohen is a Rosh Yeshiva, the head of the Otniel Yeshiva. The Otniel Yeshiva is located south of Hebron. It has a very beautiful view. It's a Hesder Yeshiva and a Kollel. Guys go there and learn, then they go to the army, they come back. You can learn there to get smicha, rabbinic ordination. And Rav Re'em HaKohen is one of the 2 Rosh Yeshivot. It's a very unique yeshiva. They're very, very open-minded, okay, to all kinds of thoughts and perspectives in Judaism, in Torah, in relationships to God, and so on. Very, very open, very, very sweet. And there's about 300 guys that learn there. Okay, now not right now, but there's about 300 guys that learn there, generally speaking. And some of the following ideas that I'm going to share with you guys are from a talk that he gave about the 3 weeks. Okay? So first of all, guys, we said these days are called Bein-HaMetzarim, between in the narrow places. Okay? Bein-HaMetzarim. The root for that word in Hebrew is tzadik, resh, resh. Okay? Okay, again, tzadik and resh and resh. That's the root of that word, metzarim. Now, tsar means narrow. Okay, a narrow place. Like min hametzar karati ya. From a narrow place I call out to you, Hashem. Or like tsarot, hardships, suffering. Okay, same idea. Now, tsarot, okay, I can choose to focus on the negative aspect of Bein-HaMetzarim of these days. I can choose to focus on the not good things which happened here, or I can choose to focus on the good things which happened. Because this same exact root of this word, tzadik resh resh, is the same exact root of the word sirim, birth pains, or contractions, contractions. Contractions is also to contract, is like narrow. Okay, it's to be when the body is going like that. Okay, when a soon-to-be happy, proud mother is giving birth. So I can choose in a birth, and I have no idea what I'm talking about because I never gave birth, but I'm just going to say this. But in a birth, or after the birth perhaps, you can choose to focus on the pain. Okay, and again, I'm saying this as an outsider, but one can choose to focus on the pain, on the contractions, on the tzirei leda, again from the same root, on the birth pains, the birth contractions, or one can choose to focus on the birth itself, on the baby, on the child, okay, on the new creation that came in. Meaning, you can focus on the means which might not have been so comfortable, or the end result, which is very beautiful. Okay, the birth, the new baby. So too, also here in Bein-HaMetzarim, in these narrow places, these 3 weeks between the 17th of Tammuz and Tisha B'Av, I can choose to focus on the bad aspects of it, on the suffering that the Jewish people went through, or I can choose to focus on the good aspects that came out of this, especially for us nowadays. Okay, the birth. What did these days birth into the world? What did these 3 weeks bring into the world nowadays as well? And that's what we're going to try to focus on. Okay, so the Maggid of Mezrich, I didn't bring all of his idea. The Maggid of Mezrich was one of the top 2 students who succeeded the Baal Shem Tov. So we're talking about 300 years ago. Reb Dov Ber of Mezrich. I'm sure most of you or many of you have heard of him. So this idea that he puts forward is brought in another special book written by another rabbi called Prit Tzaddik, written by Reb Tzadok HaKohen of Lublin. And this is the idea that's put forward by the Maggid of Mezrich. And this is what he says. He says, Ha'inyan hu, in starting or beginning to explain the 3 weeks, and I just brought a little snippet of what he said. He says, the matter is that the 22 days, Bein-HaMetzarim, the 22 days of these 3 weeks, okay, the Bein-HaMetzarim days, those 22 days, if you count from the 17th of Tammuz until Tisha B'Av, including Tisha B'Av, you got 22 days. These 22 days of Bein-HaMetzarim, Hem Neged, they are parallel to, okay, they are juxtaposed to the 22 letters of the Torah, which the Jewish people transgressed then. And he goes on to explain what does that mean. Meaning the first day of the 3 weeks, the 17th of Tammuz, what was the first not good thing, chronologically speaking, historically speaking, that happened on the 17th of Tammuz? It had nothing to do with the temple, with the Beit HaMikdash. The first thing was the breaking of the tablets. Moshe broke the tablets. When he came down and he saw the golden calf, he broke the tablets. That's the first thing that happened in the beginning of these 3 weeks. That corresponds to the letter Aleph, the beginning. Aleph is the beginning of all the Aleph Bet, the 22 letters of the Aleph Bet. It's the first letter. The Torah, the 10 Commandments, the tablets, were the beginning. Everything is based on that. And that's what was broken and what was transgressed on the first of these 22 days. And then the Maggid and Reb Tzadok he goes on to explain a little bit, okay, what the Maggid says. Okay, and the last day, Taf, the letter Taf, which is the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet, corresponds to Tisha B'Av. Okay, Tisha B'Av, which is the end of these not so happy and challenging days. So I'm not going to focus on everything the Maggid said, which is unbelievable stuff. I just want to, again, make the question a little stronger, okay? What is the connection between the destruction of the temple to the letters of the Torah? And how does that help us understand what we're mourning for? And what are we supposed to be mourning for? And what should we be crying for? And why in the world should we be missing and longing for the Beit HaMikdash? Okay? So we are supposed to mourn for something. Okay? We're supposed to mourn for something on Tisha B'Av. We're supposed to sit on the floor with candles lit, not wear shoes, okay? Be very sad and not happy, and not rejoice, not play music, not eat, and so on. And we're supposed to be sad about, and this is what we're told, what are we supposed to be sad about? What are we supposed to be mourning? We're supposed to be mourning, this is at least what we're told usually, okay, the destruction of the temple. But the problem, guys, and please, if you disagree, please speak up. The problem is that usually, what does a person mourn for? A person mourns for something which was and has disappeared. You mourn for a family relative who you knew, who was in your life, who you were close to on some level, and then they passed away, and now there's this void, there's this emptiness. It's gone. He's gone. He, she, they're gone. And you mourn about that. You're sad because you're left with this hollow feeling, because there's a certain void now in the world and in your life once this loved person, okay, departed. But it's very, very hard to mourn something that from the get-go I never had. You guys understand? You guys get what I'm saying? How am I supposed to mourn for something which I never experienced? Am I sad about my great great grandfather, okay, that I never met? I'm sad that I never met him. I hear some stories, but it doesn't come close. I can't compare that in a million years to mourning for my great grandfather, who I did know, because he was in my life. That's what I had, and then boom, he disappeared, and there's an emptiness, a void. I mourn for that. Okay, we never experienced the Beit HaMikdash, so how in the world are we supposed to mourn for an emptiness that we were already born into? We never had it, and it was taken away from us, so we can't even feel the emptiness because there was nothing there for us in the first place. You guys get my drift? Yeah. Okay. So it's very similar, guys. The in the book of Ezra, okay, Ezra the scribe, he describes, pun intended, Ezra the scribe describes that in the rebuilding of the second temple, of the second Beit HaMikdash, there were two groups of people there. You can look it up in the book of Ezra. Okay, there were two groups of people there. I didn't put it on the page, but there were two groups of people there. There were the elderly and there were the young folks who participated in the building and dedication of the second Beit HaMikdash. Now, what happened at the dedication of the second temple to these two groups? The young group were very happy and joyous and were having a party and praising Hashem and thanking God and singing and dancing. And it was unbelievable. After 70 or so years of exile, we're back in town and there's korbanot, offerings. It's great. There's a menorah. Unbelievable. And they were flipping out. They were beyond. The second group, or I should say the first group, the group of the elderly, they were sitting there and they were bawling. They were crying. They were besides themselves, not out of joy, out of happiness. It wasn't a good crying. It was a very sad, sad, sad crying, because they saw the second temple and they remembered, Gewalt, what the first temple was like and how majestic it was, and the miracles, the 10 miracles which took place every moment in the first temple, and how beautiful and how you could really feel the Kedusha, the holiness. And now they see this little shmendrik, this little Nebuch, lousy second temple building. There's no divine presence noticeable. There are no miracles. Okay, you can't really feel any Kedusha relative to what they're comparing it to the first temple. So they're sitting there crying because they have something. They're mourning the first temple because now they miss it even more when they see this really bad attempt to rebuild the first temple. So guys, but the young folks there, they had nothing to mourn about. They never saw the first temple. All they could do is rejoice. But for us guys, what in the world are we supposed to mourn? There's no void that we experienced. We didn't have it in the first place. So what are we supposed to do? What are we told? What have I been told most of my life? You read, where do you go? What can help me get into the mindset of mourning on Tisha B'Av, or these 3 weeks between the 17th of Tammuz and the 9th of Av? If you read, especially on Tisha B'Av, you read Megillat Eicha, okay, the book of Eicha, and you read the Kinot, the Lamentations, okay, the Kinos or Kinot, which are all the different, they're kind of like, they're not songs, I guess, but poems, okay, writings which describe, okay, the destruction of the first and second temples. So if I open up the book of Eicha and I open up the Kinot, K-I-N-O-T, or N-O-S, if I open up the book of Eicha and the Kinos, okay, what do I find when I open them up? I find, for the most part, I'd say 98+% of what is described in the book of Eicha and in the Kinot have to do with the negative ramifications, all things which happened as a result of the destruction of the temple. Okay, I put here a few examples. Okay, here are number 5, a few examples. Things which took place as a result of the destruction of the first and second temple. God forbid, okay, like mothers having to cook and eat their children because of the famine, blind people walking around in the streets, blood everywhere. Okay, I put here a list of some of the keynote subjects: the destruction of both the temples, people suffering, Jerusalem desolate, cannibalism, the sin of the 10 spies, the failed Bar Kokhba revolt in year 132 CE, the Crusades and the hundreds of thousands of Jews that were butchered, raped, burnt alive, the burning of the Talmud in France in the 13th century, and many, many, many other sad, sad subjects. Okay, the Holocaust is even mentioned in some of the keynote. Okay, most of Megillat Eicha, most of the book of Eicha, and the keynote, like the examples I just showed you guys, do not deal and do not touch on the lack of the temple. They don't talk about what we're missing without a temple. I hope this is starting to crystallize in your head. They don't talk about what we're missing, about the situation now without a temple. They're just talking about the negative ripples and the negative, okay, things which transpired as a result of not having the temple. But they don't talk about what the temple is all about and not having the temple itself. You guys understand what I'm saying? This was a big chidush for me. This is a big deal for me. For example, someone who didn't brush their teeth most of their lives, and now they hardly have any teeth. They have implants. They have all, it's all brittled and cavities and root canals and all these different things. So now, what can you focus on with this person? You can focus on all the cavities and root canals that he has, which are all the negative side effects, repercussions to him not having proper teeth, or you can focus on him not having proper teeth. Okay, he can't enjoy a good steak. That's something like good, which he cannot do now because he doesn't have teeth. The negative side effects are that he's full of cavities, he's full of pain, root canals. He can't make a nice white smile without fooling around or Photoshop and so on. But the main problem is with someone who has unhealthy teeth is that he can't use his teeth for what they're meant for, not the negative side effects, the cavities, the root and so on. Okay, so too, guys, with the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, most of Eicha and the keynote, they almost, I'd say 99+% of it have to do with the negative repercussions, the negative side effects, all these sad things right here, which came about as a result of no temple. But what about the temple itself? What happened to the temple itself? Why is that hardly ever mentioned in anything? And so, guys, this is a theory that I'm putting out there. Okay, from the moment the second temple was destroyed in the year 70 by Titus Flavius, Yamach Shemo, okay, from the moment the temple was destroyed, second temple, until 1948, Eicha and the keynote, as the examples that I brought here, these are things which unfortunately and heartbreakingly and painfully spoke to the Jewish people. Okay? These are things that the Jewish people were experiencing. When you were a Jew sitting in Poland, okay, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, when you were a Jew, okay, sitting on the outskirts of Spain, 500 years ago, reading this stuff, this was not a thing of the past only in the first and second temple. You were experiencing that day to day, basically. Okay, pogroms, anti-Semitism, expulsions, burning books of Torah, burning people, okay, rape, all these horrible things. This wasn't stuff of the past only. So when you read this stuff in Eicha and in the keynote, that was something that you could relate to. And that brought about a lot of tears, a lot of mourning. You would be mourning not only for the Jews that were killed in the second temple and first, okay, in the Bar Kokhba revolt, you would also be mourning for your cousin who was just burnt alive by the Cossacks, or by your uncle, okay, who was burned at the stake in the Spanish Inquisition. That's what was going on for the Jewish people. Okay, excuse me. Forgot to turn off my phone. So that's first of all. That's why the strong emphasis in the Eicha and Kinot. That's first of all. Second of all, is it really reasonable to ask a Jew who is still suffering, similar to all the different things that the Jews in the temple period suffered? Is it really sensible to ask them to mourn for the lack of a temple, to place the focus, like I'm trying to suggest, on the lack of the temple and not on the suffering which resulted by not having a temple? Is that a reasonable practical demand to ask a Jew who's just been kicked out of their town in Ukraine and who's just trying to build his house together after half of his family has been wiped out by Khmelnytsky in the 17th century? Is that a practical thing to even ask? Obviously not. You're going to ask a Jew to start thinking about a temple in Jerusalem years ago when their current life is horrible and they're suffering? For those years from the year 70 till 1948, okay, I'm talking about, that's not a practical demand. So almost all the kinot and eicha are all describing the suffering and pain and negative results which happened as a result of the destruction of the temple. But hardly any of them describe the temple itself. And I just offer an explanation why that's been. But now, guys, now we're in a serious problem. Because now, me as a Jew, 2020, Tufshin Pei, post 1948, now I have a serious issue. Because now I'm living in the modern independent state of Israel with all of its problems and issues, fine. Okay, I have a privilege to live now where I am not experiencing, thank God, any of this stuff really. Do you walk around seeing any of this stuff in the streets of Israel? Okay, do we experience things that the communities in Europe experienced in the 11th and 12th centuries with the Crusaders? Far from it, God forbid. So I cannot relate. Me as a Jew living now, whether I'm in Israel or even in America or Europe, I can't relate to what is described in Eicha and the Kinot on such a level that it causes me pain. I hardly know anybody. The closest I come to that, and I say this with a lot of pain and seriousness, the closest I might come to is knowing someone, having a relative or a friend like you, Shaul, who had a relative in the Holocaust. That's the closest I can come to experiencing the pain that the Jewish people went through for from the year 70 till around 1948. So then once again, how am I supposed to, I'm not going to be brought to tears that easily. What am I supposed to even mourn? I can't mourn all these things described in Eicha and the Kinot. I have no idea about this. This is something, it's like fairy tale, almost. These are almost like fairy tales for me. Burning the Talmud, okay? Cannibalism, what are you talking about? Like, seriously? So I, as a Jew nowadays, I'm kind of stuck. I need different Kinot. I need the book of Eicha, I'm saying this carefully, to be rewritten, perhaps. Because that was written, and the Kinot were described a different time, and they cannot really help me mourn, because I don't know what to mourn. It doesn't talk about the temple hardly. All it talks about is all the pain and suffering that the Jews went through as a result of not having a temple. But it doesn't talk about the temple itself, the Beit HaMikdash itself. So now we're in a predicament, okay? Now we're kind of stuck. So Rav Re'em, the rabbi that I mentioned earlier, okay, mentions, and he suggests the following thing, okay? There's no way to feel the lack of the Beit HaMikdash, the lack of the temple, and to mourn it, to truly mourn it, unless I do two things. This is what he suggests. And you can take it or leave it, and maybe we'll do one of these things together next time. Okay, unless I do these two things. Unless first I learn about the Beit HaMikdash, not about the negative repercussions which happened as a result of not having the temple. No, I have to learn about the temple, the Beit HaMikdash itself. Okay, have to learn about the Beit HaMikdash itself, and B, if I use if I visualize, like guided visualization, if I sit down somewhere, close my eyes, whatever it is, meditate, and try to picture what the world looked like and what it can look like and will look like, b'mera b'yameinu, okay, with the third Beit HaMikdash, to try to visualize a fixed, wholesome world, okay, and to picture the temple not only from an architectural perspective, a beautiful building, the colors and the height and shining and all that stuff. That's nice and cute. That's also important. External beauty is also important. But try to visualize, okay, reality that the house of Hashem is at the head, the top of the world, and all of humanity is coming to the Beit HaMikdash. All of humanity is coming to this house, the third temple, which will last forever. This eternal, infinite home. All of humanity is supposed to come to it and strengthen and connect and plug into, like mamish, plug into the source of life, plug into Hashem, plug into God. All of humanity coming and davening, praying together, okay? All of humanity becoming, all people becoming part, becoming one with Hashem in the creation and existence of the world at every given moment. Try to visualize, what does it mean, world peace, real world peace, not in some paper, okay, in the United Nations. Real world peace, where human beings look at one another and all they see is good, and they get along on a true, real, not politically correct level, on an MS, deep, infinite level. Try to imagine that. Try to imagine how that would affect all of reality, all of existence, planet Earth from an ecological perspective, okay? From the air, the crispness in the air, how we treat animals, how we treat each other, okay? Health, human beings' health, everything. If all of humanity is going to be plugged into the source of life, Hashem, through the Beit HaMikdash, it's a whole different world, okay? All the planes, the trains, everything, the cars, the taxis, bringing all of humanity to the Beit HaMikdash to connect to the creator of the world, okay? All of, or many of the hardships and problems of the world falling away and disappearing, decimating, because a lot of the problems in the world are the result of the reality not being as it should be. With the third temple, reality, existence, planet Earth will be in its an ideal state as it should be. And consequently, a lot of the problems that we have nowadays between each other, pollution, health, whatever it is just going to disappear and disseminate, and everything will be healed. Okay? So that's why in these days, guys, these are just a few examples. It's important to read books, sfarim, that speak about the temple, that speak about all these different things that I just presented, speak about these subjects. What does it mean to have a temple? How will that affect all of humanity and the world? You can read about these things, for example, in part of the prophecy of Yirmiyahu. I mentioned this a few minutes ago. Okay, from chapter 30, 31, 32, 33, it describes some of these things. Some of the prophecies of Tzfanya and Micha, okay, and so on. There are other books which describe the inner message and what it means to have a temple in our midst and have this conduit through which I can connect to the creator of the world. Okay? And then you, again, visualize what that would look like. We have no idea really, but try to visualize as much as possible after you've learned all these different things about the temple. And then that hopefully should awaken longing and desire and dreaming for a third temple, for that existence, for all of creation to be on such a wholesome, healthy, beautiful, holy, sweet, lovey level. And consequently, that there's chance that can cause true mourning that we haven't had that for almost 2,000 years. Okay? And that will cause something to yearn for and to cry for. And then, of course, guys, and our time is basically up, I want to connect this now back to what the Maggid of Mezrich said here about the 22 letters of the alphabet, which connect to the 22 days that we're in between the 17th of Tammuz and Tisha B'Av. Because without the Beit HaMikdash, without this conduit, without this building, or more importantly, what's in the building, the purpose of the building, without the Beit HaMikdash, which is a connector between me and Hashem, I really have no idea what the Torah is all about. Okay? Meaning, in every day that the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, and every day that Jerusalem was more destroyed and fell more apart, in these 3 weeks, in Yemei Bein-HaMetzarim, every day that another part of Yerushalayim and the temple fell apart, another letter of the Aleph Bet stopped shining. Another letter of the Aleph Bet lost its real meaning and lost its true potential. Okay? The letters of the Aleph Bet became destroyed as well, and they stopped shining. For example, until like 2-3 weeks ago, you could have gone cherry picking here in the Golan. So when I went cherry picking a few times, okay, so they would tell us, when you pick the cherries, make sure to pick the cherries with the stem. If you want the cherries to last a week or two in your fridge, you got to pick the cherry with the stem, because the stem is full of the minerals and nutrients, and it will continue giving that cherry life, okay, and robust. And the cherries will be much more tasty and last much longer, okay? Now, when I was thinking about that, in our context, if you look at the cherry in terms of the Torah, the Beit HaMikdash is the stem. The Beit HaMikdash is what connects us to the source, to Hashem, to the tree, to the source of life. Okay, try to take a cherry without a stem at the end of the summer and try to enjoy it. It's horrible. Leave a cherry out without a stem after a few weeks at the end of the summer in the heat. That's nothing. You have a little bit taste of a cherry. It's not fresh. It doesn't have hardly any nutrients. Okay, it's not all juicy because it hasn't been connected to the source of its life for a long time. Guys, we're already almost 2,000 years without our stem, without our conduit, without the Beit HaMikdash, which connects us to the source of life, to Hashem. Okay? And nonetheless, the Torah is still sweet. The Torah is still robust. The Torah still has flavor to it. Even though so many years have gone by, that cherry is still lying around and it still has sweetness in it. It still is tasty. Now imagine, guys, how much more sweeter and how much more refreshing and juicy that cherry was when it was connected to its source of life, to the tree, through the stem. Can you imagine how much sweeter the Torah would be when we have a Beit HaMikdash, when we're connected to the source of life, to the source of everything that is, to the source of Hashem? How much more, how much deeper, and it's just words that I'm saying. We can't imagine or fathom or really imagine in a million years how much more awesome and robust and juicy the Torah can be with the Beit HaMikdash. We have no concept because we're dealing with a cherry which has been lying around for 1900 years, not connected to the stem. And nonetheless, it still has some good sweetness and taste. But how much more, a gazillion more times over. Alachat kama v'kama, this cherry, the Torah, could be with the Beit HaMikdash, with us connected and being pumped with the source of life, to Hashem, and the whole world connected to this stem, to the Beit HaMikdash. And in that view, guys, in every day of these 3 weeks, one more letter of the Aleph Bet is crying out, I want to be who I can really be. I have so much to give, every letter of the Aleph Bet. I have so much to share. You mamish have no idea how much depth I have. Every letter of the Hebrew Aleph Bet is crying out. Every pasuk, every word in the Torah. But there's no temple, so I'm not connected to my source. I'm not plugged into Hashem. I mamish need the Beit HaMikdash. I mamish need the temple. And for that, we have what to mourn for. Not only to be connected to this conduit, which connects us to the infinite, to the source of everything that is, but also to be connected and really be able to understand and be exposed to Torah in its highest potential, and not this diluted 1940 something years version of this cherry after it's been picked and it's away from its source, the Torah that we have nowadays. And that's something to mourn for. If we're able to meditate on these things that I shared and so much more in this mindset, that really can bring a person perhaps to tears and to longing and to crying. Okay? And Rabbi Shlomo, I just want to end by what Rabbi Shlomo here says. I put on the page here. Okay? You know, friends, why don't I eat on Tisha B'Av? It's not really a fast day. It's like a threatening of suicide to Hashem. I say, Master of the world, Ribono Shel Olam, if Mashiach isn't coming, I never want to eat again. Unless you build Yerushalayim, I don't want to be in this world. There's no reason for me to live. Without the temple, this is not really a life. This is a joke. This is like a Western facade, but there's nothing real behind it. I also don't wear shoes. We're not supposed to wear proper leather shoes on Tisha B'Av, because I'm telling Hashem, I'm not moving from here. What does the person need shoes for? For going from one place to another. If you're just standing or sitting or sleeping or lying down, you don't need shoes. I'm telling Hashem on Tisha B'Av, I refuse to move. I have nowhere to go. And I will not budge from the spot until you rebuild the Bein-HaMetzarim. But I want you to know something even deeper, Shlomo says. On Tisha B'Av, we don't learn. You're also not supposed to learn Torah on Tisha B'Av. And listen how beautiful this is in light of what I just shared with you guys. Because you know what it is, Shlomo says? I can be learning and learning and learning, and I know so much, yet it hasn't made me the kind of Jew I want to be. Why don't I learn on Tisha B'Av? Because I realize on Tisha B'Av that the learning that I'm doing it's nothing. It's a joke without the Beit HaMikdash. It's a diluted version that's been diluted over and over and over again for almost 2,000 years. It's not plugged into the source of life. And so on Tisha B'Av, I tell Hashem that without the Beit HaMikdash, I can't continue learning this Torah. Okay? There is no real Torah without the Beit HaMikdash. Heavy stuff, guys. But I'd love to hear if any of you have something to say. This place that I just reached and shared and understood really about the 3 weeks and Tisha B'Av and mourning and everything, it's really special. It really touched me. It's very, very deep. Very deep. So if anybody wants to say anything, hey, Ray, Shelley.
Yeah, actually, there's an amazing teacher, woman teacher in a woman's Bas Midrash who religiously, and her class is about korbanim. And this woman has a committed and devoted sense that if and when, please